Hi everyone, just here with the quick build video of the my swappable trainer fuselage. I apologize about the poor video quality, but I'm kind of working with some old equipment. But anyway, I'm going to try to just kind of give you a quick run through of how to put this thing together. The build plans will hopefully be available in an article on flighttest.com. If you can't find mine, no need, they have wonderful stuff on there. So anyway, I'm just going to kind of give you a quick run through. And I'm not going to show you how to build the wings in this video. They're going to be separate videos all on their own. This will just be the fuselage. It's pretty quick put together. I'm going to assume that you already have all your pieces cut out. I've really kept with the flight test way of doing things. Same color lines, same style of folds, everything like that. So hopefully it'll make it a little bit easier to build. Other than that, let's get started. To get it out of the way, I'm going to go ahead and bend my landing gear piece and my elevator support. So to do that, what I do is I just lay it over the plan, and I spent quite a while on these plans trying to make it as easy as possible. But you can see there's just the little green lines on how it needs to be bent. So I'm just going to lay it over there, and then at the bend, grab it with my linemans and just make my bends. You'll want to take and kick this out at a 90-degree angle, and you can go either left or right, doesn't really matter, but just take and put you a quick bend in there, and there's your rear landing gear strut. And this you can really just kind of eyeball, and you just want a large C shape for the most part. And this is just the way I designed the elevator. It's pretty flimsy, but I really like the look of it. So this is just a real quick way of adding some support to it. So now we have those pieces made. We'll set that aside, and we're good to go. I actually adhere my plans to my foam board with 3M spray adhesive, but that's completely optional, and I've tried to add as many little markers on here as I can. As you can see, some of them say score cut on opposite side, and there's pretty clear markers, like where the windshield meets will be a nice line to cut. But I've tried to make the plans as self-explanatory as possible. If there's any issues with it at all, please don't hesitate to send me a message or anything like that. And then of course all your holes are just kind of starting points for your barbecue skewers. So the first thing I want to do is peel all this paper off that I've used for my plans. I've already gone through and peeled out all my foam and cut everything out the way it needs to be, and I've creased my paper on the blue lines. If you've done any flight test builds before, all this is old news to you. So anyway, so to get started, I actually want to fold in my support pieces, and what these are just little pieces that go in whenever we attach our wing. It gives it a little more meat to hold on to other than one layer of foam board. So we'll just put down a nice thin layer of hot glue, press that down. Same thing with this one, nice thin layer, press that down. This will give us a little bit more meat on the front to hold it down, so we'll go ahead and same thing again, little light coated glue, not getting it in our crease. We'll just fold that together straight back. With all that done, we're ready to form our fuselage. Now this is a B-style fold, which means if it's laying flat on your work surface, you just fold it straight up and put it up against the side. So you're not lifting it up, you're just folding it straight over. So as you can, we just put a little bit right down in here, right on our roof for the most part. And then with these big pieces here that we folded over, we can add a little extra glue for a little extra support. And we'll just fold that right up. And to stay nice and square, I like to take a little speed square and hold it up against it, just to make sure we're nice and flush. Same thing on the other side. Now I may have gone a little overboard on my design. I've left these little flaps of paper attached to the windshield and then also the tail just to kind of cover that foam. I didn't like the notch look the way I had it first, so now whenever we put this together, that paper makes a nice smooth transition. And again, that's optional. You could really just cut that off if you wanted to, but I like it. So let's put our windshield and nose and all that fun stuff together. So I'm just going to put a bead of glue on each side on the paper and then actually on the foam itself. And I'm pretty generous with my glue on the nose of the plane, because if it is a trainer, it's going to crash, probably a lot. So anyway, that just kind of bends in, and our paper meets the nose. We have a nice little, we got the nose of our fuselage ready to go. Our tail is the same way, as that little flap of paper, and it just folds in. Now on the tail, with these notches being cut for our tail feathers, it makes it kind of easy to bend that. So what I suggest on this is running a nice healthy bead of glue inside that corner there and on the paper. Same thing on the other side. I'm actually going to lay this down on my workbench and press it onto the paper, and just keeping a nice tight fit in there. Now one place you will want to reinforce, that is worth reinforcing, is this nose panel. So definitely run in and just run a nice thin bead of glue down each side. So next, let's get ready. Let's get our tail feathers ready. Now you can see how thin that hinge is right here in the middle, and that's why we need our little support. Take our support that we bent and kind of line it up, get it roughly center. We'll call that center. And then actually just push it into our elevator. Got it pushed into our elevator, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go in and cut out a really thin V of foam. So now the two holes that you pushed into the elevator, just put a little drop of glue in each one, a little bead of glue in that channel that you cut, and just push in our support. And then we'll cut our hinge line in the larger surface on your stabilizer, and cut through the paper. But that's an easy enough fix. We'll just get us a piece of packing tape. And just real quickly cut off your excess, and our elevator is done. Our rudder, very similar situation. We will take and cut our hinge line on the larger portion, trying to be careful not to cut the paper. Make sure you got the range that you want. And now on this rudder, since we're going to have a steerable tail wheel, this hinge takes a lot of force. There's a lot of weight that's put on this, so I definitely recommend reinforcing this with packing tape. Now I would definitely wait till the very end to put on our tail wheel, just for simplicity. Just give you a rough idea, our tail feathers kind of fit together like this, and then of course they will slide into our fuselage. But before we do that, let's put together our servo holder. And this one is marked, this is our little servo spacer. And what this does, this is an A fold, so this side actually folds up onto the main piece. And what this piece is just a little servo spacer that fits right inside the tail of our fuselage. This gives us a home for our servos, and it also acts as our rear catch for our power pod. So let's go ahead and get it glued together. Now on your plans, there's two extremely small pieces of foam that it asks you to cut out. And what this is actually a height spacer for our front servo. So both of these, you just put one on front of the servo hole with the legs of it down. So we put one up front, and it should be a 4 millimeter by 4 millimeter piece, so direction doesn't matter. And we put one on the back, and that just gives our servo the right height off of our tail. So the next thing we want to do is actually place this inside our fuselage, and to do that we'll actually need our power pod. Now we want to take this and we want to put it inside our tail. Whenever we have that in the position that we want it, it's kind of hard to glue in place. So what I recommend is just taking a marker and tracing its location. Kind of hinge it up on the inside, and then we're just going to put a bead of glue across the bottom and just try to kind of glue that into place. And this allows us to have a slightly custom fit for everybody's different power pod. Now let's go ahead and get started on our electronics. We will be using two Hextronics 9-gram servos. This is just what I'm using. You can really use whatever size you'd like. Anyway, our servos will just slip in. Just take your wire, put it through one of the servo holes or holders or wherever you want to go with it. And again, just a drop of glue. I'll hold it in place. So on our control horns, we're going to use the one-way control horns on both of them. And now it's optional, but I like to use the little speed clevises. They're cheap, they're easy, they really save you a lot of headache. But to get the speed clevis through a 9-gram servo horn, you need a little 5/64 drill bit, and power drill's a little overkill on this, but that's what I got. So I'm actually going to drill through the third hole from the end on the control horn, and just use a little piece of foam to keep from drilling into your cutting mat. So we've got both of our control horns ready to go. Now before you install your control horns, you want to make sure that your servos are centered. They're supposed to come centered, but we all know how that works. So grab your swappable fuselage, or just a receiver and BEC that you have laying around. So I'm going to go ahead and plug in my rudder and elevator. Honestly, I'm not sure which is which at this point in time. I don't remember how I have it set up, but that's alright, as long as they're centered. So I'm going to plug that in. I'm going to make sure that all my trims are centered. We're going to go ahead and give it a little bit of power and center our servos. There we go. And now that we know our servos are centered, we can go ahead and install our control horns. We just want to install them as perpendicular as possible, and the control horns will face the side that's closest to the servo. So let us go in right like that, and since we're using speed clevises, we can go ahead and fasten down our control horn using the provided screw. So I'm putting on our tail feathers, what I want to do is go ahead and run a bead of glue right down the middle of our vertical stabilizer, and then on our horizontal stabilizer just a little bit around this little notch. Doesn't take much. The last thing you want is a loose rudder flapping around up there. I'm just going to get that installed. Nice. And if it's not exactly perpendicular, it's not going to hurt much, because whenever we put this into our fuselage, it's going to straighten everything out. So all we're going to do is slip it into the slots that are cut. It should slide in. It's going to be a little bit tight in the way it's cut. Just run an extremely thin bead where our tail feathers meet our body. I think we need to go ahead and throw on our control horns. Or in my case, popsicle sticks with holes drilled in the end. Whatever control horn you're using, if you're using a screw-on type, there should be just enough room there, but I'm not. I'm using a wonderful popsicle sticks. So to use my popsicle sticks, I'm just going to line it up right over the hinge line. I'm going to make a small little cut in the rudder with my X-Acto knife. Then I'm just going to test fit my super fancy control horn and ensure that my control horn hole is right over the hinge line. So that's my method for it. After I have it test fitted, I'm just going to pull that out, drop in some glue, and there is my rudder control horn. Again, I'm just going to test fit it. Make sure it's directly over the hinge line. Slip in my control horn. And popsicle stick control horns are not the strongest in the world, but they do the job pretty well. So I won't go into a whole lot of depth on our control rods. But again, I'm using a 1.4 millimeter music wire. So I'm just going to do a quick Z-bend on one end. And I'm just going to roughly measure. I'm using the furthest servo for my rudder. So I'm just going to leave about a 1/2 inch to play with, just for safety's sake. So I've got my rudder control wire ready to go. I'm just going to bend that up a little bit and slip it into the speed clevis. Go ahead and reattach your receiver. So this is going to be our elevator. This will be our rudder. And turn on your receiver and go ahead and give it some power. And this is just going to be to recenter our servos. And there we go. With our servos recentered, grab something nice and flat. I use my speed square. Make sure your control surface is level. And just tighten down your clevis. Do the same thing on the rudder. Make sure our control surface is flat. Tighten down your clevis. And we now have functioning tail feathers. So now, just to finish up the process, it's as simple as getting our barbecue skewers in place and all that fun stuff. So on this one, we actually, when I had my plans, I kind of made some pilot holes just with a screwdriver. So you can pre-cut them or you can put them through and cut. But use you a nice new sharp barbecue skewer and just go through each side. And this one actually has enough space to glue it on the inside. So now we have our areas to hold on our wings. Just hides our servos and locks in our swappable fuselage even more. So there's a small mark on there for where to put our zip ties. And I like to take a little piece of popsicle stick and our 2 marks for where our zip ties go. These are marked out on the plan, so I'm just going to glue a little piece of popsicle stick right between that, and that just gives that a little more to grab onto. Alright, now don't tighten this down yet. We're going to do this a lot like we did the fuselage on some of the other flight test designs. So to attach this in, it's just 2 beads of glue. Just put a bead of glue on each side here behind the hinge. And we're going to slide that in at the very back of our fuselage, all the way back, keeping our hinge open so it doesn't get glued shut. So we'll put a barbecue skewer through this back hole here, and what we want to do is catch that zip tie with this barbecue skewer. Alright, I'm just going to tighten down the zip tie until our bottom plate sits flush with the rest of our body. Just like that. And just go in and snip off the rest of your zip tie. So we're going to go ahead and test fit our power pod, and for our power pod to go in on this one, our little back flap has to be open. So we just open our little back flap and slip our power pod in. And it just straddles the servos in the back and sits on our little servo support. Make sure everything fits snug. So we're going to go ahead and put in our 2 front dowels that hold on our power pod. And again, if you've done any other flight test builds, this is old news to you, so I'm not going to go into any detail. You pretty much just line everything up, shove in a couple of dowel rods. You can mark them where you want to clip them off, or just go ahead and clip them off. We're going to pull our power pod back off. Pull out our dowels. A little bit of glue, and back in our dowels go. Our first optional thing that I highly recommend is our steerable tail wheel. And the way that this attaches is super simple. We just line this part up with the bottom, and we just push it straight into our rudder. So we're going to pull it back out, and here we're going to be extremely generous with the glue. We're going to push glue down into that hole. We're going to put a nice bead of glue all around where this landing gear support is going to sit. And then we just put it right back in a nice little rear landing gear support. In what I feel is true flight test fashion, we're just going to attach our rear landing wheel with a small zip tie. I'm just going to torque that down on there as tight as I can. Clip it off. And just as a extra means of support, a little bit of hot glue. And there is our steerable tail wheel. The second optional thing that I like to do are with these number 8 washers. Again, this is totally optional, but it kind of adds a nice look, and then it also adds a lot of strength to all of our pieces that have barbecue skewers going through it. So we can just remove our barbecue skewer, from our door here. Lay a nice thin bead of glue around the barbecue skewer hole, and then put our washer right around the hole. And then if you want, put your barbecue skewer back in, make sure everything still lines up. Same thing on the other side, and if you're careful, you can just put a little bit of glue around the barbecue skewer, try not to get any on it, and then push your washer down around the barbecue skewer and pull it out real quick before it gets glued into place. And what this does, just on impact, it just adds a little bit more surface area to keep it from ripping through the foam as easy. And I'm actually going to do this on my wings. And I'm also going to do this where my power pod attaches. The last optional thing I have is actually support that goes inside the fuselage where the wing joins. If you lawn dart it very often, this will start to bow out and give you a really loose fit on the wing. So a very quick, very easy solution that I really like, that gives a lot of rigidity with very little weight, is just taking two pieces of skewer and cutting to fit between our two wing attachment points on the inside of the fuselage. And we just cut them to fit on each side. Just a nice snug fit. And we'll take and actually glue this right along here with that skewer fitting in between where our wing aligns. Now you can see the inside has been reinforced. And she's done. Now all we need is a wing.